All right, let's do this. Peanut, if you're staying in the room, no talking. Hello, and welcome to the PhotoWork podcast, the talking, touchy-feely version of my book, PhotoWork, 40 Photographers on Process and Practice. Hello, everyone. I'm Sasha Wolf, recording today at the Bearsville Theater in Woodstock, New York, joined as usual by my friend and producer, the man with the raspy voice, Mr. Michael, not feeling well, Chauvin Dalton. Michael.
Not COVID.
Wow, you couldn't have gotten that in any faster.
You got to get that out of the way when you tell people you're not feeling well.
I know. What is that? It's still like this weird stigma, like, oh, God. Yeah.
People get nervous, but I mean, it's more typical normal cold, flu, virus, whatever is going around and shot through my house
good
so
old-fashioned
fast.
cold, yeah.
That's right.
You and I were both at the New York Art Book Fair over the weekend, which was very fun.
It was. It was great to meet some people face-to-face, some guests, past and coming up, yes.
Yeah, the New York Art Book Fair is a lot like APAD, the photo fair. It's just everyone shows up, so it's like a lot of hugging, a lot of meeting people, a lot of schmoozing. And I did what I always do at the New York Art Book Fair. I left with one book, one tote bag, and one T-shirt.
I know. You outdid me. I left with one book and one tote bag.
No T-shirt? So many good T-shirts.
I'm not a T-shirt person.
It's such a strange thing that it's an excellent place to shop, not just for books, but for clothing.
It makes it fun.
Yeah, for merch.
And I'm sure that helps some of these places.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's partly why I do it.
Discuss a little bit today. It's not exactly the most profitable business in the world, but selling.
So, a good segue. Boy, that was excellent. So our guest...
I'm such a pro.
You are a pro. Thank God, one of us. So our guest today was Paul Schiek, who's the founder, publisher of TBW Books. And it was really wonderful to talk to Paul. What did you think?
Yeah, this was a real insider's baseball conversation between you and Paul, being on that side of the business where you're representing artists. And I love Paul's ideas about why he does what he does. And I don't want to give anything away because it's also good, but there's just a whole conversation about selecting artists and the way Paul thinks about business and collaboration, obviously, and all of those things. And it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's really fun. I will apologize. It's not one of our best sound quality episodes. Paul's sound was a little wonky, and my sound, I shouldn't have any excuses. I shouldn't be making excuses at this point.
You have one excuse.
It's hard because I really thought at this point I would just be recording from the Airstream, but the Airstream is just not done yet. And so often the guys are in there working like they are today, putting in the cabinets. And when I recorded Paul, they were in there. So I came back to Bearsville to record, but the recording studio here was being used. So I had to just record in an empty room. And so you will hear what sounds like an empty room.
This will be a little more en plein air style podcasting.
Yes.
Paul has a lot of traffic noises and air conditioning noises.
Apologies, everyone. So, all right. Well, it's sort of a longish episode. So why don't we get to it? We have a lot of great guests coming up, and things continue to just hum along and be really exciting. I know we keep teasing the website, which I swear to God is almost done.
We've seen it.
Yeah, we've seen it. And there's other things we keep saying we're working on. We are. And everything's, of course, always a little bit more complicated than you think it's going to be and takes a little bit longer. But we're making a lot of progress and stuff for you guys, for the community. So we'll be announcing that stuff soon in detail.
And there's one little teaser I'd like to put out for this show.
Yeah.
Paul reveals the meaning behind TBW.
Oh, yeah, he
and
does.
What it stands for. That
right.
was wild.
Yeah, that was a good one. At first, when I asked him, he sort of hesitated. I think I said, like, well, you don't have to tell me. Or,
You did.
Yeah.
You did. Yep.
But he did.
And he does. That's a good one.
All right on. Well, Michael Chauvin-Dalton, I hope you feel better. And if you don't mind,
Thank you.
Please take it away.
My pleasure. And here's your conversation with Paul Schiek.
Paul Schiek, welcome to the PhotoWork podcast. It's great to have corralled you into this. You're down in Mexico, and that didn't stop us from getting a hold of you. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So, Paul, as you probably know, we start every podcast with a person's bio and background and how they got to where they are right now. So we'll get to hear the tale of your relocation. But if you could, just tell us about yourself, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, I started life in Wisconsin, 1977. Left there when I was 18. Moved to Oakland, California. Have lived there ever since, 24, 25 years. Started a family there 8 years ago and recently relocated to Mexico. And then obviously there's just a ton of stuff that happens in between there that we could or could not get into. But
no, give me the in-between.
The in-between, yeah.
Like, how did you wind up in Oakland?
Oakland's interesting. I don't know how long of a podcast you want to do here, but the long story is, I was a anxious person living in Wisconsin with very little things around me that I felt were interesting. And so I was constantly searching for interesting things and constantly searching for, I guess what we'd call culture, trying to find like new things and experience new things. And so I found my way through collecting records. At that time, it was like mail order. So you'd send your like money off and buy records from a place that was, usually in California or something. And then a couple weeks later, you get the record in the mail. And that and magazines, I was constantly trying to find magazines. So you could go to a mall, maybe there'd be like a bookstore that had a magazine section, and just pour through all that stuff and try to find things of interest. And eventually, I was really interested in like punk rock, and we were traveling a lot to like try to find shows. So we were going to Green Bay, or we were going to Milwaukee, or if you're lucky, you could get to Chicago. This is like 14, 15 years old. Really into like skateboarding. I mean, it's the same story that everybody seems to have, but it's like I was just searching for things. And eventually, it was like San Francisco was this place to go. I got a ticket, me and my friend, one-way ticket on an airplane. First time I'd flown. Went to San Francisco, got there. It was like extremely brutal to try to like, I had just turned 18. So, trying to find an apartment, it was just like, we didn't have like a rental portfolio or anything. So it just wasn't happening, know? So we ended up staying in like these hotels that you could rent by the week. And it was just brutal. Eventually I had heard from other people, like over in Oakland, like, people are living in these warehouses. They're like $200 a month. There's 12 people living in it. It's like, you can do whatever you want. And I was just like, it just made sense to me. Like, okay, this is what I need to do. So there's a little stint in between there. I'd gone back to Wisconsin for a little bit. There's little love stories involved or whatever, but I eventually ended back in California, maybe a year later or 6 months later, and went straight to Oakland. And it was like, that was it. I just never left, And Oakland was this place at the time. I mean, this was like 1997, 98, 99. It was this place where anything went, It was just this amazing, it was super scary. It was super like dirty. It was super dark, but also like within there was this ability to just kind of do whatever you wanted. People didn't mess with you. It was just cheap. You could just do what you wanted. And it was awesome. So lived in warehouses and kind of was meeting people and hanging out and doing that thing and going to a ton of shows. A lot of like music was happening in warehouses. And so it was just a pretty amazing time. And just never left and started a life there and just started meeting people and scratching out a way to live in Oakland. And, Wisconsin's this huge part of my life, but Oakland's this larger part of my life, to be honest, because I was in Wisconsin for 18 years, and obviously those are the super formative years, but Oakland was like 18 until recently, which are also crazy formative time of your life. And like I said, I started a family there. I started a business there. I started most of my life lessons. Like I kind of say like Wisconsin instilled certain ethics in me, but Oakland kind of raised me, turned me into the person I am today. So
the adult. Yeah.
The adult. Yeah. So Oakland's this huge thing for me. And so it was really weird to relocate to Mexico. Not weird. It was just like emotional, it was like a really emotional thing. Like, oh, am I turning my back on this place that I consider family, And I haven't turned my back on it. I mean, we still go back to Oakland. A lot of our friends are there. I'll always have a connection to Oakland, but right now we live in Mexico, and it's been this kind of new chapter for us. And it's been really awesome. It's been really like new and exciting. And I feel a similar sense of, I don't know what the word is, invigoration, like I feel like invigorated in a way. Yeah.
Well, when things are new, it's invigorating.
Totally. And I feel that here in the same way that I felt that about Oakland, like in the 90s, it's like, oh, anything goes here. I can do anything. I can be anybody. I can do anything. Nobody's like messing with me. If you want to build a house, build a fucking house. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. It's just wild here. It's just amazing. So we've been having a good time. My kid's in school, and, we're just kind of exploring and learning Spanish and, doing all the things. So it's been great.
What's the story gets you to be, one of the most respected and important photo book publishers? How did we get there?
Thank you for saying that.
It's true.
Thank you. It means a lot to hear that. Well, I was essentially just kind of living and existing for a long period of time. I went to art school really late in life. Not late in life, late by art school standards, So that period from like 18 to, 27 was just like living, working jobs, getting by, enjoying life, but living not a healthy life. I was having a good time, but it wasn't like necessarily healthy or productive. And at some point that wears off, at some point there's a decision to be made of like, okay, what's the next chapter look like, and where do we go from here? And I had no formal education. I had no real expectations placed on me by anybody. So it was just kind of like easy for me to just kind of be cruising along. But at some point it was like, I need to make a change, or I go into my 30s doing this, and that's hard. So it was really simply, what are my interests? What might I be good at? I had been taking photographs of like bands that were playing in warehouses and things like that. And there were friends that were around, but I didn't know, I had never even heard of Robert Frank or anything. So it was like, it's time to go to art school. There was one in Oakland called California College of Arts and Crafts. What do I do to apply there? I wiggled my way through the application process, and for whatever reason I was accepted, and it was like literally like day one, my world just completely changed, like 180 degrees. I had all of a sudden just seen all these resources. There was a computer room with like 15 computers in it. I'd never been on a computer. I didn't have an email address. None of that. It was this really exciting new thing for me, where it was like, okay, I have this potential where my life can just completely change. And so I became obsessed with school in a weird way, and thus photography. So I met people that had knowledge of photography that I didn't have, and it excited me. I was like, what is this thing? Like I remember being in a class on day one and seeing like a Jeff Wall photograph and being like, what is this? Like it looks like a mundane photograph. And then I found out he recreated it, and it took him 6 months to recreate it. And it just like, it was so confusing to me, but also so exciting, like why would someone do that? Why is that considered art? Why is that worth $1 million? Why is that? And so I just started investigating these things. And then, then I saw like, I'll Be Your Mirror by Nan Goldin or whatever. It's just like, the library just like opened up this whole thing where it was like, these books are just here, and I can just look at them all day long. So I just, I rarely left school. Obviously I had other jobs and things, but if I wasn't working, I was at school. Like I'm talking like, if I could be at school 24 hours a day, I'd be there at 24 hours a day, and I'd be in the library, I'd be in the dark room, I'd be just, And so I just became literally obsessed with photography. And people that know me closely, that's not a surprise to them. Like whatever I'm into it like 110%. And fortunately, at that point in my life, it was photography, because that's like a weird stage of life where those things.
It's a healthy obsession.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And I just got so into it and I got so interested in it and I just wanted to know everything about it. And then, coming from no money and not having resources, financial resources, books became really interesting to me because it was like you could go to the library and it was like all in one place and it was perfectly organized. And that made a lot of sense to me. This idea that like photography can be placed into this container that can be carried or it can be shipped or like, all those things made a lot of sense to me. The gallery system and the museum, the institutions didn't really make sense to me because I didn't feel comfortable in them. So I didn't feel comfortable walking into a gallery. I didn't feel comfortable walking into a museum. And so the book made a lot of sense to me because it was like, you could keep it in your own space. You didn't have to talk to anybody else about it. You didn't have to run into anybody else while you were looking at it. Because I was still nervous to be looking at this stuff, because it wasn't my world. It was like this new thing. It wasn't taboo, but it was like this new thing for me. And so I wasn't comfortable necessarily letting other people know that this was my new like obsession, And so the book thing made a lot of sense because I would just sit in the library and look and be like, wow, what is, it's like Imogen Cunningham. Like, what kind of name is that? Who is this person? What am I looking at here? Okay, this is, Twinka. She's nude in a forest. Like, that's photography? I've never seen that before. Okay, this is amazing. And equally stimulated by the Germans and Struth and thinking about how big this photo can be. Gursky, it's this big. And it couldn't be any more different from Imogen, but it was just equally as interesting to me because it was new, So I just became really obsessed, for lack of a better word. I kind of hate that word obsessed, but that's what it was. It became this new obsession and interest of mine, and I just went 110%. So I'm not really answering your question about how I got into publishing, but that's sort of the backstory of like how I got interested in photography. And then from there, it was like I'd already been really interested in and also making what are called zines, now. I was already participating in publishing on some level, although I was publishing things in editions of like 20. And I was consuming all these things through magazines and trading people and looking at different like printed material. And so the idea was just really simple to me. Like, okay, I'm going to make printing and publishing my new obsession, which is photography. Whether that was my own photography or whether that was other people's was to be determined. But moving ahead, I finally got to the point of graduation and it was time to make a show of the photographs I'd been making. And the idea was you print this show, and at the time it was like 40 by 50 was the size that everyone was printing these photographs. It just didn't make any sense to me. It was just like, I'm going to make these like large scale photographs. I'm going to like pay to mount them, maybe pay to frame them. And then I have to put them in this gallery and 5 people are going to come and look at it and they're all going to be my friends. And then I'm going to have to like store this stuff somewhere. It just didn't make any sense, So I thought what's much more interesting to me is like to ask my professors if I could make my show be a book. And they were very supportive of that idea. And then it became, everybody was asking, well, who's going to publish it? Who's going to publish it? And I was like, well, all the books I'm looking at, they say Steidl on them. They say Powerhouse. They say Nazreli. They say Twin Palms. And like, I don't know any of those people at those places. And I doubt if I send my idea to Steidl, I'm going to get a response. So it's just kind of this, like in my mind, it was just obvious, like, cause I'd done everything like this myself. Ever since I was a kid, it was like, if you want to build a boat, you build a boat. If you want to, you know what I mean? If you want to,
I do.
If you want to go across the country, you go across the country. You don't ask someone else how to do it. You just do it. And so like, it just made a lot of sense to me to just be like, well, I'll be the publisher then. Yeah, it was just this really obvious thing. Like, oh, I'll just publish the book. And I had an ambition to publish like one book,
Right.
My senior show. And I don't know, it was just this challenge. Like, how do you publish a book? What is a book? What are the components of a book? What's the structure of a book? And I just treated it like building a house. It was like, okay, you need a foundation. I guess the foundation's paper, and then you need paint. I guess the paint is ink, and you have X amount of resources. And so I just looked at it like very, I guess pragmatically is the right way to say it. Like I just was like, here's the pieces I need to make a book. And so I looked around Oakland and I said like, how can I print things? Actually, the story really is this. As part of your senior show, you had to print a postcard and a postcard announcing your show so that you'd leave these postcards around town and people would come to your show. And they had these, suggestions like, oh, why don't you print a postcard at this place? And you can get 500 postcards for $99 and you give them this code and they'll print your postcard. And so I said, oh, okay, I've got this in on a printer. I can get 500 postcards for $100. Well, what if I had 20 postcards? That would be a 40-page book front and back, and so that's how I started like attacking the issue. Mm-hmm. And so I printed, I went there and I told them I had a publishing company. I asked for a meeting and I sat there and I said like, could I get a 10% discount if I included your name in the back of my book, And they're just like, sure,
good
whatever,
instincts.
Guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I just was like, I want to print a large amount of postcards with you. And they're like, oh, cool. What are you talking? And I'm like, 20 postcards. And like, to them, that they're used to doing like 1 million inserts for like the local, for like a magazine or something. So they kind of laughed at me, but whatever. I was taking it really seriously. And I just was like, for $99, I can get 500 postcards and one side's color and the other side's black and white. So I just made this maquette and I said like, if this photograph on the side of this postcard is color, then the photograph on the back side can be black and white. And I just like laid up a thing like that. What if I wanted to do a full spread? Then postcard number 2B and postcard 3A could join together and be a full spread, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's totally like the opposite of signatures. It's like almost Japanese style, like plate binding, where you're just like laying sheets of paper up against each other and then binding them that way. Mm-hmm. But it really like trained my mind to think about like laying things out. And like, because they were printed on separate forms, they were like, one would have like 2 points magenta in the black and whites, and the other one would have like 3 points yellow in the black and white on the other. So when you laid them up, they had this funky like pagination. It didn't work out at all, but it's charming, I guess. And it was like my attempt at making a book and not a zine, because I was like taking it so seriously. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, at some point I wanted to do that again. And then at some point I wanted to do it again. And then every time I did it, I was like, well, I want to work with like better photographs. I want to work with a better printer. I want to work with better materials. I want to make it bigger. So then they went from 4x6 postcards to 5x7 postcards. And it was just this constant attempt at making something more, like making it bigger, making it better, making it printed nicer, working with different artists. And it just like snowballed. Well, it didn't snowball. I pushed the peanut forward like inch by inch by inch by inch.
And when sorry, go ahead.
No, I just constantly was like obsessed again with like figuring this problem out. Like, what is a publishing company? Why does it exist?
Right.
What's the purpose of it? Who can benefit from it? How do you fund it? And all those things, like it wasn't interesting for me to like go have someone else do that.
Right.
I was interested in figuring that out myself. And so trial and tribulation, sweat, tears, that whole thing, it just is to where it is now. I mean, that's a simplified answer, but
well, I'll start poking around. So first of all, what does TBW stand for?
So that goes back to when I was graduating from school and I was making that one book. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not $1 million question, but I'm asked this often, and it's like, I'm always reluctant to like answer it. But
you don't have to.
I'm happy to, because so much time has passed. It just doesn't matter to me anymore. But like, so I thought I'd make one book and it would be my senior thesis, and then I would never publish again. So I was like, what, the antagonistic side of me was like, everybody in my class has these photographs of birds flying through the air. And I was like, man, it's just not me. Like, it's not, you know what I mean? Like I don't feel majestic, I feel like I'm of the earth, like I'm working class. I'm like struggling all the time, like emotionally and financially. And I wanted to like poke fun at that idea. And so when I'd look in the back of books and I kind of copied like the credits, because I had no idea what an ISBN was. I didn't know what these things were. And so I thought it would be funny to just like open a book and then like change what I saw there and just randomly put stuff in. So it was like printed in Europe. And I'd just say like printed in Oakland, or, I just like changed it all. And when it came time to like published by, I just thought, well, here's this inside like little prod at my cohort, and it'll be an inside joke that like 8 people will understand. And so I called it These Birds Walk. And so the idea was like, my birds have to walk, to work. And it was sort of this classist kind of like thing.
I like it.
And so These Birds Walk, TBW. And I had this little logo of a bird, and it had like all these legs, and it, it's just like whatever. And that was at the back of the book. So published by These Birds Walk. And as the years went on, and as I like kept taking this like more and more seriously, and it started to become what resembled somewhat of a business, it was embarrassing to be like, oh yeah, you can, the company, you go to apply for like a business license, and it's like, what's the business called? Oh, These Birds Walk. It just became like ridiculous, So in an attempt to sort of validate or professionalize what I was doing, I took the route of making it sound more like a gallery or something. I just changed it to TBW. It means something to me. It's funny. It's almost like a band name, like when a band starts, they have these names, and you think about it really intensely, like, oh my God, the band is called blah, blah, blah. But then after like the third record, it's just like, you don't even think about it. It's just the band name, and you just say it without thinking about it, no matter how dumb it sounds or whatever. And that's what TBW has become for me. It's just kind of this name that's attached to like me and my efforts in publishing, So,
well, I like that story.
Yeah.
So let's talk about those efforts, because in all seriousness, TBW is one of the, top photo book publishers. And I guess the sort of, first question that I have, and that I know a lot of other people will probably have, is how do you decide on the books you're going to publish? Is there a program? Is there some ethos? Is there...
Yeah.
Some parameters, or, is it, I like it, I'll publish it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the answer is that I'm not a business person. I think I wanted to be a business person. I wanted to make smart business decisions, but at the core of this whole thing is like, I'm an artist, and I'm a visual person with a strong desire to like work with visual people who are the best at what they do. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I choose. Like, I have to be interested in the project, because if it's based on a business decision, then why would I try to do that within publishing? Why wouldn't I just bite the bullet and go work in a factory or what, you know what I mean? Where it's like more secure than publishing, publishing like as a business, one of the like most insane things you could try to do, it's just not smart business to like print these objects, especially in a digital age, it just doesn't make any financial sense. And so when coming to terms with that, I have to look at myself and realize like the only reason you'd continue doing this is because you're absolutely like obsessed and passionate about it. And so if that's it, and there's only so many hours in our life, it's like, if you're going to spend an obnoxious amount of hours every week working on this thing, then you better be doing that because it like really satisfies you and fulfills you. And so that's the criteria. Like, I have to be, I often say to people, like, none of us are going to be making enough money doing this, either the artist or the publisher, for us to not enjoy the process. Like, I say, like,
absolutely.
If I'm not willing to like have dinner with you or let you sleep on my couch because we're making a book together, like, if I don't want you sleeping on my couch because I don't like you as a person, then why would I do this? You know what I mean? So
I do know what you mean.
Yeah. So it truly is this attempt at like, creating community and finding like-minded friends that I want to work with. And
that's my philosophy. That's how I run my business. So
yeah, you have to. And it's not, that doesn't mean it pays off on a business level, but it pays off on a life level. It makes me feel like I'm a real human being. Makes me feel like I'm contributing and assisting others. Well, it's a nice way to live. My resources.
Right? I mean, how does a project come to you? I mean, how often are you going out? I mean, a lot of these questions are, questions people ask me too. So there's just a ton of overlap. But how often is a project, being pitched to you versus you, knowing about an artist you're interested in and going out and sort of going after the project yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you know what? It's really shifted a lot lately for me. So people are pitching things to us all the time, but I rarely am finding things that way that are like stimulating to me, In the beginning, I was going out and seeking, right? Because I was like trying to build this thing. And so I was seeking out projects and seeking out working with certain artists. And that's really changed pretty dramatically for me lately. And I've been way more stimulated in finding artists that maybe are unknown or, because I'm following, undervalued, or I'm finding much more enjoyment in what I call like being of service, like trying to like use the resources I have and help other people round out their projects. Because the truth is, a lot of like really amazing photographers are not amazing designers or conceptualists. They're like they're really great at making images, but that's where it ends for them. And then I can come in and help them make a book and say like, well, this was shot in this area of the country, this region of the country, which makes me think of dusty roads. What if we decided to print on this kind of paper, And so that's where I come in and help them like actually craft a book out of it. But I'm much more interested in working with artists that I find super interesting, as opposed to, this is like a good career move or something like that,
right?
Because I still don't think of this as a career,
I have news for you.
Yeah.
Well, I recently, last season, I interviewed Mimi Plum, and I feel like you definitely had a hand in sort of raising Mimi's profile, and a lot of people really discovered who she is. Was Landfall the first book you did with her?
Yeah, and it's the only book I've done with her,
only book.
Actually. Yeah.
I mean, is that a good example of sort of what you're talking about?
I think it's a great example, actually. I worked in a frame shop for a long time, for a decade, actually, doing high-end framing for customers and, working with museums and galleries and things like that. So at one point, there were 2 of those Mimi Plum prints in the shop, and I remember going in. I always worked at night. I always would go in late at night, so I didn't have to be around other people. Just do my own thing. And so I remember going in and seeing 2 of those, and I just immediately, I had no idea when they were from or who made them or anything, but I just remember thinking like, whoever made these, I want to talk to them immediately.
Yeah.
And I remember like leaving a note on them, like, hey, when this artist picks this up, can you have them call me? And at some point, we got in touch and we had looked at the stuff, and I honestly didn't know if that work was contemporary or if it was 45 years old. I honestly didn't know, and that was fascinating to me. Like, holy shit. Like, anytime photography can do something unexpected, I'm like generally interested. I don't care if that's digital or analog or whatever. Whenever I'm like, holy shit, I didn't know this could happen, And so when looking at the archive, it was like, okay, there's clearly something incredible here, but I don't know how to organize it. I don't know what it's about, And so that book Landfall took me like over 3 years.
Wow.
Of me just like sitting with the work late at night and looking at it and being like, what is this? What is this about? This isn't about global warming. This isn't about the war in Iraq. This isn't, it's like, this is like bigger than that, And so it just was this really meditative process of like whittling down, like, hey, what would an edit look like? It's funny because like you look at that Landfall project, and I've looked on the hard drive at cover designs, and I'm not kidding. I bet you there's 45 cover designs. I'm not like exaggerating. I think there's probably 45 cover designs. And that was just like, I'm always interested in how little can be given to an audience. How simple can the idea be for maximum effect? Like, that's something I think of all the time with printing and making these books, And so you land on this cover design, and it's like nothing, It's like, it's just this very, very minimal cover design. And that was like, I was with my kid at like this place in Oakland. People are true Oaklanders, they know when I say this, but there's this place, Fairyland, there. And it's essentially like this place that was designed in the 50s by this guy. And everything's homemade and everything, all the signs are hand painted. And it's just this really amazing place. I'm sitting there watching my kid play, and I'm looking at this lettering on the wall. that somebody had painted 70 years ago. And I'm thinking, holy shit, that's the cover of this book. You know, and it took like 3 years and just a random Sunday afternoon with my kid in this place called Fairyland to like find that font, you know? And, you know, I made 40 other designs before that. And so it's like that kind of thing, like time becomes this element to making books that people don't consider. Like I'm a huge believer in time, like time with photography. Photography plus time equals something more, you know, and time has to be a factor. And so when people are like, hey, I'd like to publish this book, and I say, oh, I'm really interested in it. And they're like, I need it in 6 months because I'm having this show. I generally am just like, and I'm out. You know, like that's not going to work for me because you're not allowing time to be a factor. And with Landfall, time had to be this thing. It had to be in place in order for me to understand the work and figure out what it was. So I'm really like adamant about that. Time, slow everything down and let it kind of age and settle in and let nature become sort of like, you know, almost like spiritual, you know, let it kind of like fall into place. And that's where you have to take business out of it, right? Because if business is directing those decisions, then who has time? No one has time because they need the money, you know? And so I just sort of decided that like, okay, business can't really be a part of this. Obviously it has to on some level, you know, but like I try to stay out of that as much as possible and just let it, you know, I just want to make the best book possible, have it be impactful and have it last a long time. You know, like if a book isn't really that interesting after 2 years because the design of the book fades away or something, then I don't think, you know, it's a successful book, even if it sold 5,000 or 50,000 copies or whatever the case is. You know, it's not interesting to me if it's not good after 2 years. You know, I have a couple mentors in publishing, and like one of them said to me one time that like, if you can look at one of your books after 10 years and you're still interested in flipping through it, then it's a successful book. You know, 10 years. Because they're that important, you know, we're putting these things out in the world. They're physical objects that presumably are going to be around after us. And that's important, you know, that's a really like heavy responsibility. And so to just kind of plug and play and put the images in there and just keep barfing these books out into the world, like doesn't make any sense to me, and it doesn't excite me. And so, you know, I'm trying to do less books annually. Like I want to continue to try to remove myself from that treadmill. And like I'm trying to actually do less books annually, less titles, but make them much better books. You know, I'd rather do one Landfall every 2 years than 10 titles every year that I'm like, that I think are okay and they keep the business running. I'd rather do the former.
How often do you get a book? It sounds to me, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, like, you know, you really want to be a main part of the editing and sequencing, and that I assume if you're not, that's not as interesting a project to you.
Yeah. I've really only done 2 books out of, I don't know how many I've done, but I've only done 2 books where I wasn't a part of the edit and design on a major level. And so I'm not going to sit here and say like, this is what distinguishes TBW from other publishers, because I don't really know how other publishers do it. But I do know that like, for me, I come to it as an artist, you know? Yeah. And I had to make a realization at some point that like, I'm more comfortable in the background and I'm more comfortable assisting others, you know, and I'm better at it than being the artist. Like I've worked with certain artists where I'm like, oh shit, I get it. That's what a real photographer is like, where they'll like lay down in traffic to get the shot. They have to do it. And I'm like, that's not for me. Like I'm not interested in being out there that way, getting photographs, but I am interested in like doing that on the backside of things. Like, you know,
I understand.
Yeah. And so I found this little comfortable position that I'm in as a publisher, but as an artist, I am like, have to be really, really in there. And so it's really like, it starts with editing. You know, the project generally comes to me and there's, you know, let's just say for the sake of conversation, 500 photographs that make up a body of work.
Well, and Paul, let me let's use a book as an example that I think a lot of people know. And I also think it ties back to what you were saying about doing less books, but doing books that are of great consequence, whether it's, like you said, the materials you're using or the impact it's having, et cetera. So I'm thinking of Kern Hadelberg's last book, new book with you. I don't know what constitutes new anymore, but anyway, it still came out this past year, River's Dream. So let's talk about that, process and how you and Kern, as much as you feel comfortable, work together on that.
Yeah. This one is an example of somewhat of an outlier because no, it's okay. It's okay because Kern is truly like one of the exceptional kind of like great photographers of our time, in my opinion.
I agree.
But I'm just like so in awe of what he does with a camera. And talk about time. Time is like this huge element to Kern. Kern will call me from the road and he'll be like, hey man, like, I'm in wherever. I'll be like, oh, cool. Are you making photos? He's like, no, I've been hanging out in this shack with this guy for like 3 days, drinking. And his mom's been making us food and like, we're hanging out. And like, I think I might make a photo tomorrow. It's like that in today's day and age is absurd, right? But what happens is it comes through in the photos. Mm-hmm. You can tell that like, there's something about time and the way he makes photos and the amount of time he takes making photos that comes through in the photos. I'm constantly amazed by Kern and his process.
So let's use another book as an example of your process. If Kern is not a good example, because I want to hear about your process.
Okay.
So you pick.
Can it be a book maybe people haven't seen? I mean, they've got like a bunch of books coming out.
Of course,
that, like,
absolutely.
Would be a great. Okay, so a good example I think of that is a woman named Peggy Nolan, who the book is actually on the boat coming over to our warehouses in Oakland now.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's always exciting. It's always like nerve-wracking and exciting. Obviously, I've seen proofs of it, so I know it's printed well and I know what the final book looks like. But when you see those pallets of books come to you, it's like, okay, we did it.
Yeah.
We did this again.
Yep.
It's really kind of like exciting. But Peggy's amazing. So she was a single mother who raised 7 kids in Florida and photographed them the whole time. And so she had this body of work. It's all black and white. And the way that I think about it when I first saw it was like looking at Larry Clark, but from like a loving mother's perspective. Mm-hmm. So these kids are like smoking pot. They're like making out. They're like having sex in her house. They're like doing all this stuff that 7 kids with a single mother would do, but she photographed it all. And so I'm looking at this body of work and like, I'm thinking, holy shit, like this is a responsibility, right? Because like, we don't have another chance to show this book. You know what I mean? This is the book. This is essentially her life's work. And it's my job to figure out what to do with this and how to present it. And so that is like, what size is the book? What color is the book? What font do we use for the book? What paper is the book printed on? Where do we print it in China and Europe? Is there nudity in it? Do we really want to show a picture of their absentee father who recently passed away? Who do we ask to write an afterword? Is the afterword from a academic point of view or is it from a poetic point of view? You know what I mean? Like all of these decisions add up to being a successful book or an unsuccessful book. And that all takes time. You can't phone that in. And so I'm looking at probably, I'd say 500 photographs. And I'm thinking, I'd like to get this down to about 80 or 90 photographs. And so you start doing an edit and you start seeing themes emerging and you start seeing, hey, is this the same kid, but 10 years later, that kind of stuff. And then, obviously I want to do right by Peggy. So I'm meeting with her and maybe she's in town for a week. And so we have dinner and then I show her an edit and I'm nervous to show it to her because what if she hates it, but I love it. And, you just kind of whittle away from there. And then it starts becoming this thing. And there's so much of it is intuition, like so much of it is just like, I feel like this book should be this size, and it's all based on obviously it's based on my own interests, but it's also based on my own like research, right? Like, cause I'm constantly looking at books, I'm constantly buying books, trading books, looking at books, thinking about books. And so a lot of times, I'll say like, look, I don't know why, but I was taking a shower this morning and I was thinking about the book and I just feel like it should be this intimate object and it should be, only about 8 inches high and a vertical orientation. And so then I just go to my shelf and I start like pulling out books that are that height and I lay them all on the table and then I start going through it and I Or maybe I'll go just by subject matter. Okay, what other mothers have photographed their children? So I'll go grab my Sally Manns and I'll grab, you know what I mean? Or what other photographers have photographed packs of wild kids, you know? So I might go grab my Larry Clark books. I might go grab, you know what I mean? And I pull them all out and I start just studying and just start thinking like, okay, what am I trying to achieve here? What am I trying to say here? And if that's aligned with, if the artist is comfortable with what I'm trying to say and convey, then we're on the right track, you know? And like, you know, you stumble along the way and you try 40 different covers. I remember with this book, she was talking about, you know, raising these kids in these orange groves, these citrus groves in Florida. And so I was like, okay, this book has to be like bright orange, you know? And at some point she was like, you know, the orange is like lame. I hate that color. Like I lived in that. I don't want an orange book. And I thought, well, isn't it interesting? It references the citrus. And she was like, no, I don't want that. And like, you know, so that idea just died on the vine. And so you can't rush these things. They just have to you have to have these conversations with these artists and ask them what they want. You know, there was something that happened with that book where at the beginning, there's just like this little prose that was written, and it's something to the effect of, I don't have it in front of me, but something to the effect of like, between the years of 1972 and 1984, I raised 7 kids on my own. All of them are still alive today. Occasionally, their father would stop by the house. And one time he tried to teach himself to juggle grapefruits in my living room. He didn't succeed at that either. And that was like this thing that she and I kind of wrote together. You know, I was like, so did the father ever come by?
Right.
And, you know, and so we kind of like created this little poetic kind of thing, a foreword for the book, right? Well, during the process of making the book, this father passed away, and she called me and she said, "Hey, I just want to let you know that the kid's father just passed away, and I don't think I'm comfortable anymore with the writing at the beginning of the book because it was such a dig, you know, like oh, he didn't succeed at that either." And I should mention the name of the book is called Juggling is Easy, and you know, by just simply removing the "he didn't succeed at that either," it all of a sudden, the writing at the beginning of the book almost became like a subtle tribute to their father. And like everybody was all of a sudden like really comfortable with it. He was a man who lived and died. And so we didn't want to be digging at him. Yeah, you know, we didn't want to like take the low road. We wanted to take the high road. And so, you know, we had to edit along the way. And it's those little things that like all add up to something being right or wrong, in my opinion, right or wrong when it comes to making these books, you know?
Well, it's really moving to me to hear how personal it all is for you. I mean, just in a sort of narcissistic way, because I work in a very similar fashion, but I also believe this is what makes a good life, I guess.
Yeah.
So it is really just so moving. And I know you have these really beautiful relationships with people, whether someone like Kern Hadelberg is, you know, comes in with, you know, more of knowing what he wants. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I know that you've done, you know, Kern has 3 books, but one of them he did with his partner, but he has his 2 main monographs, both of which he's done with you. And so obviously that's a very meaningful relationship to him.
Yeah, all I've been trying to do, and this is I feel like I've said this so many times, I hope it's not boring to people, but you know, I grew up, it sounds corny to say, but I grew up in like this whole punk scene, you know? And like, so I was observing people running record labels where they'd print 500 copies of their record and they were in the band, but they also ran the label, and they would, you know, there was this whole community, and I wasn't a musician, you know, but I was observing all of this because my friends were in the bands or whatever the case was. And I was like, wow, this is like so incredible. Everybody's like helping each other out. And, you know, there's this community. And when I found photography, it was like, I'm building that. I'm doing that exact same thing, but with my interest, which is photography. And so I've always treated TBW as like a record label, you know, that is like an independent record label. And that means that we're going to like war together. You know, it's like really hard to make a book. You know what I mean? It's really hard. It takes tremendous amount of like effort, and you argue over fonts, and it's expensive and time consuming. And so you're like, if I can't go to war with you like family, then why am I doing this? You know? And so I'm always attempting to build these relationships that are like family. And that's always been my intent, is to create this little family of wildly creative and interesting artists that have a place to express themselves. And that place is TBW Books, That's always just been my dream and my goal. And sometimes it's been successful and sometimes it hasn't, but that's always been at the core of it. I oftentimes think like, yeah, I guess I own TBW Books, or I'm the founder or whatever. Like if I had a business card, it would say founder or whatever. But really it's like, I like to think of it as like a home for everybody, It's just kind of like, it's all of ours, This isn't mine. It's like this thing that we've all built together. I just happen to be the one who started it.
Yeah. I call Sasha Wolf projects a cooperative. So
yeah,
some people may say that I am indeed actually a tyrant, but no one would say that. So let me just ask you, because we're coming to the end here, sort of practical wrap-up question. For artists out there who are trying to get the attention of someone like you, do you have a preference of what you want to see? I mean, if someone submits a sort of fully realized maquette versus just a PDF or, a bunch of images that they haven't sequenced. I mean, how do you like to have new work come to you?
The answer to this, I get this question from time to time, and the answer to this is very unsatisfying for the person asking the question. It's that there isn't a formula. You know what I mean? There's not one thing I like.
And that's
you know
fine.
what I mean?
That's a good answer. That's okay.
Yeah. I'm doing a book right now with an artist named Alice Wong, and she is a member of an artist group in Oakland called Creative Growth. And it's an incredible place that facilitates art making for artists with severe disabilities. And they have a fundraiser each year. My wife does all the hair for them, for their fashion show each year as a fundraiser. And we've been, supporting and going to all the events for years and years and years and collecting from them. And a couple of years ago, I've always wanted to do projects within the community of Oakland and participate on a community level. Like I wanted to sponsor a little league team, TBW Books, little league team, shit like that. I've always wanted to participate in my community and give back to my community. So this idea of working with creative growth was really important to me. And I had bought a piece that Alice had made, and it's a vintage photograph that she painted over with markers. And I got the piece, framed it, put it in my house, lived with it. And it was like, why am I not doing a book of this stuff? Why not? And so I went to Creative Growth, told them I'd love to do a book of Alice's work. And my point is that I just am in love with that work and wanted to figure out a way to make a book. And Alice had no ambition or desire to make a book of it. She just wants to paint on these photographs. And so that's one way. And occasionally I'll be speaking or doing, what are they called? Portfolio critiques for, something. And I'll meet people that way. And I'll say God, this is really interesting work. We should keep in touch. Or can you send me a PDF of this stuff? And then sometimes, I've been for well over a decade, extremely active at the book fairs and things like that. I'm constantly traveling. If I'm going to New York, if I'm going to New York for the book fair, I'm going to schedule extra days and I'm going to go have coffee with an artist that I've been seeing or that I'm super interested in their work. Other artists who I've worked with and I trust will give me the name of somebody and that just happened recently with Paul Sepuya. I was working on a book with him and he said, hey, I've been buying these photographs from this woman in New Orleans, Carla Williams. She's got this archive of Black vernacular stuff that's really incredible. And she just posted these photos that she made in the 80s, self-portraits. And he showed me two of them. And I was like, Paul, I have to be in touch with her immediately, And now she and I are working on a very large monograph of work that she made for 20 years that no one has seen. And she's only made self-portraits. And I think that they're some of the most important work that I've ever been a part of. So that, all credit to Paul for exposing me to that person because Paul knew my interests. Right. Paul knew that I would be interested in seeing this work.
Yep.
And so it comes through trusted colleagues that I've built friendships and relationships with over the years. It comes from me being out in the world and just constantly looking at things. And it comes occasionally from submissions. I'll tell you that there's only been 2 books that I've ever printed that have come on cold submission. I've never, out of all the books that I've done, only 2 of them have come on cold submission. So there's not really one way. If I'm interested in it and if it's good, I like to think like it'll cross my path sometime.
Yeah.
But if it's the hot new artist that like I should be knowing about, I'm generally like not interested. Like if it's like everybody's talking about this person and like I'm generally like not, I have to be just totally interested in the work. And that goes back to this not really being a business for me, but being like an extension of my art practice. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I don't know if that answered the question or not.
No. Yes. And I think that's great. And I'll just sort of only half joking say that at least give people hope that you have done 2 books that came on cold submission. So there's hope for people.
The bottom line is it has to contribute in some way to photography, to the conversation of photography, right? If it's just another book, like I can't do it. If it's contributing in some way to the dialogue of like pushing the photography peanut forward, then I want to do it. Then I want to be a part of it, you know?
Well, I like it. I love it. Paul, thank you so much for spending so much time with me today, hanging out, talking. I love talking with you. And if you're going to be at the New York Art Book Fair, then I'll see you. I will be there. It's a little different now that I'm flying out of Mexico to come back to the States to do these things. But yeah, I'll be there. I'm excited to see a bunch of people who I haven't seen in a long time. Yeah. Because of the pandemic, it's like, feels like this like long void that we've been in. So yeah, it'll be really good to see people. Hopefully I see you there. Definitely. And definitely. Yeah. This has been fun. Thanks. All right. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Take care.
You're welcome. You take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
PhotoWork with Sasha Wolf is produced by me, Michael Chauvin-Dalton of Real Photo Show. The associate producer is Taylor Selsback, and the executive producer is Sasha Wolf. Our theme music is by J. Walter Hawks. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe and rate us with all the stars available on your listening platform.